My name is Michael Carter. For over a decade, I worked as a middle manager at an engineering firm. We designed and built machines for clients across various industries. I enjoyed my work though. I knew my chances of advancing beyond my position were slim. It was a family-run business, and unless you were part of the family, your potential for growth was limited. Still, I took pride in my work. I believed in doing a job well, and I brought that ethic into my personal life. People told me I was a good man, honest, dependable, someone you could count on. I like to think I was. I had a good sense of humor, or at least I used to. I worked hard, provided well for my family, and cared about others. I took my marriage seriously, but it turns out I was the only one doing. So let me explain how it all began in high school. I was a slightly above average student, not the smartest in the class, but not at the bottom either. I worked hard to achieve good grades, and my dedication paid off. I wasn't the kind of guy who got into trouble unless I was pushed too far. If someone crossed the line, I stood my ground. Fights happened, but once the dust settled, I let the grudges go. That's just how I was wired. I had a close group of male friends, the kind of friends who'd stick with you through thick and thin. At least that's what I believed back then. When it came to dating, I wasn't particularly handsome, so women didn't flock to me. But I had my fair share of relationships, and I prided myself on how I treated women. I was raised to respect people, especially women, and I always took no for an answer. I never bragged about intimate encounters or shared private details with others. I valued trust and privacy. That approach earned me the respect of many women, and ironically, some of them became my strongest allies during the darkest period of my life. It wasn't always that way. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. During my toughest times, I discovered that some of my so-called friends were never real friends at all. After high school, I enrolled in an engineering program at a nearby college, while working part-time at Docker Engineering. It was hard, juggling work and studies. But I had a passion for building things. My fascination with machines started when I was a kid, collecting Lego sets. As I got older, that passion evolved into more sophisticated pursuits, like computer-assisted design and mechanical engineering. I was a bit of a gadget geek. I always had the latest tools and devices. One of my prized possessions was a small discrete camera disguised as a badge. It was a nifty piece of tech I bought for fun. Little did I know, it would play a critical role in unraveling the lies that would later destroy my marriage. But in getting ahead of myself, it was during my first year of college that I attended a summer party that would change my life. My friend, James, had been dating a nursing student named Laura. She was bright, confident and outgoing, the kind of person who could light up a room. James convinced me to come along, saying there would be plenty of other nursing students there. I was skeptical. Why would a group of student nurses be interested in a bunch of engineering students when there were medical students at the party? But I went anyway. That's where I met Emily was, the loudest or most outgoing person at the party. But there was something about her that drew me in. She was beautiful, in an understated way. About 5'5" tall with a slender frame and shoulder length. Brown hair. She had a natural elegance, the kind of beauty that didn't need much embellishment. We started talking, and to my surprise, we clicked immediately. She laughed at my awkward jokes and didn't seem put off by my lack of dance skills. By the end of the night, she suggested we meet again, and I eagerly agreed. There was no way I was going to let this opportunity slip away. We started dating, and before long, I found myself falling for her hard. Emily was different from anyone I'd ever been with. She was driven, compassionate, and had a calming presence that put me at ease. I missed her terribly whenever we were apart, and every time I saw her, my heart raced, like it did the first time we met. My parents noticed the change in me. They teased me about it, but in a supportive way. They could see how happy Emily made me. My mom adored her, treating her like the daughter She never had even my brother. Dan, who was always skeptical of my relationships, gave his approval. Emily inspired me to work harder in school. And at my job, I wanted to be someone she could respect, someone she could be proud of. We often talked about the future. Emily dreamed of becoming a registered nurse, and she was clear about one thing. She didn't want children, at least not while she was building her career. That was a sticking point for me. I loved the idea of having kids someday. I believed that having a family wouldn't hinder her career. If anything, I thought it would enrich her life. But Emily was adamant. She was ready, and she was sure she ever would be. It became a recurring point of contention between us. I sought advice from my parents, who encouraged me to follow my heart. My mom, especially, thought Emily was a wonderful match for me and believed we could work through our differences. In the end, I gave in. I loved Emily too much to let her go over something that might never even become an issue. We got married 3 years after we started dating. It was June 16th, 2009. A day I'll never forget. Our wedding was a modest affair. James was my best man, and Laura was Emily's maid of honor. By that time, James and Laura were no longer a couple. Shed moved on to dating a doctor, which James often joked about. She traded up. HED say, with a chuckle. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. I knew its tongue a bit. Emily looked breathtaking. She walked down the aisle in an ivory satin dress. I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was radiant, and as she smiled at me, I felt like the luckiest man in the world. After the wedding, Emily moved into my house. A modest home I'd bought from my grandparents. It needed a lot of work, but I was handy and had made significant improvements before the wedding. There were still a few areas that needed updating, but it was a home. I was proud of our marriage. Wasn't perfect, but it was good. We rarely argued, and when we did, it was usually about minor things. Emily insisted on keeping her own bank account, which I was thrilled about. She wanted financial independence, and after some debate, we agreed to open a joint expenses, while keeping our separate accounts for personal use. Despite the occasional disagreement, I believed we had a solid foundation. Emily seemed happy, and I loved her more with each passing day. But as the years went on, there were signs. I chose to ignore little things that didn't add up. Nights when Emily would go away to visit her sister, Sophie, or attend work events that seemed oddly timed. I missed her terribly during those absences, but I never suspected anything sinister. I trusted her completely. Looking back, now I realize how blind I was. The cracks in our marriage were there all along. I just didn't want to see them. Our first few years of marriage were by all appearances good. Not perfect, but solid. Emily threw herself into her work as a nurse, and I continued to grow in my role at the engineering firm. We lived a modest, comfortable life. Most of our social life revolved around Emily's friends from the hospital, and while I tried my best to fit in, I often felt like an outsider. Emily's best friend, Laura, was a constant presence at these gatherings. She and Emily were as close as sisters. Laura was loud, opinionated, and always the center of attention. I tolerated her because she made Emily happy, but I never fully trusted her. There was something calculating about her that didn't sit right with me. Looking back, now I wonder if I should have paid more attention to that gut feeling. Emily's work schedule was demanding. She often worked my shifts, followed by a stretch of days off. It wasn't common for her to visit her sister, Sophie. During those breaks, Carrie lived 2 hours away, and Emily assured me that the trips were a chance for her to recharge. He'll be back before you know it, she'd say with a smile. And did. Try not to let her see how much I hated being apart from her. I missed her. Every time she left, the house felt empty without her. Emily rarely spoke about her work. She seemed content being a regular nurse and had no interest in climbing the career ladder. I don't want the extra responsibility, she told me. Once it takes me away from the patients, I'd rather spend my time helping people than sitting in meetings. I respected her decision. It was her life. After all, socially, we spent most of our time with her medical colleagues. I still saw my old friends, James, Mark and Grant, but those meetups were less frequent. Emily encouraged me to join her friends for golf. Weekends or nights out at the time. I appreciated her support. She never tried to stop me from doing the things I enjoyed occasionally. I joined some of the other husbands for golf. We weren't professionals, but we were competitive enough to keep things interesting. I worked on my game and managed to lower my handicap to a 6, which earned me some respect from the group. It was a way to bond, even if I didn't always feel like I fit in over time. Emily's visits to her sister became more frequent at first. It was 2 or 3 times a year. Then it was every couple of months. I noticed the pattern, but I told myself it was just part of her routine. She worked hard, and she deserved a break. But something didn't sit right with me. I pushed the thought aside. I didn't want to be the kind of husband who questioned his wife's every move. I trusted Emily. I loved her, and I believed she loved me too. Our 10th wedding anniversary was approaching, and I wanted to do something special for Emily. I reached out to Laura, hoping to get her input. We planned a surprise evening at a hotel. Dinner, dancing, and a romantic night away from home. Laura thought it was a great idea and promised to keep it a secret. A few of our friends expressed interest in joining us for dinner and drinks before the romantic part of the evening began. I didn't mind. I figured it would be nice to have a group celebration before Emily, and I retreated to our room for the night. When I finally told Emily about the plan, she was thrilled. Her excitement was contagious, and I couldn't wait to see her reaction when she saw the hotel and the effort it put into making the night special. The day of the anniversary celebration, Emily spent hours getting ready. She asked me to wait for her downstairs while she finished getting dressed. When she finally came down the stairs, I was stunned. She looked breathtaking. Emily had always been beautiful, but that night, she radiated elegance and confidence. Her lilac satin dress hugged her figure perfectly, ending just above mid-thigh. She wore stockings, a rare treat, and her hair was styled to reveal her neck. Spot. I loved to kiss. I couldn't take my eyes off her. "You look incredible," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. "I love you so much. Forget the hotel. Let's stay here. Let's celebrate. Right now." Emily laughed, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Not yet," she teased. "This is for Yuri, the best husband anyone could wish for tonight. I'm going to tease you all night. And when we get back to the room, well, what's in the first? Let's just say, it'll make it worth your while." Her words filled me with anticipation. I was on top of the world. We picked up Laura and her husband, Brian, on the way to the hotel. Brian didn't seem particularly enthusiastic about the evening. He was a trauma surgeon, and I figured he was just having a rough day at work. I didn't think much of it. When we arrived at the hotel, we checked into our rooms and dropped off our bags. Emily was unusually affectionate, whispering promises in my ear that made my heart race. "You'll rock your world tonight," she said with a smile. "I love you, Michael. You're everything to me." I believed her. At the nightclub, we found a table near the back wall, close to the bar, but far enough from the speakers to hold a conversation. It was the perfect spot to relax between dances. Emily made it clear that she only wanted to dance with me for the first part of the evening. We spent the next 90 minutes on the dance floor, stopping occasionally for drinks. I stuck to water, while Emily sipped wine. She was radiant, her laughter lighting up the room. I felt like the luckiest man alive. And then everything changed. We were dancing, when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around, confused, and in that split second, Emily was gone. She had vanished from my arms into the embrace of another man. I stood there, stunned. They danced together, completely at ease, as if they'd done it 100 times before. Emily looked happier than I had ever seen her too. Happy. The way she gazed at him sent a jolt of pain through my chest. Who was this man? I stumbled back to our table, trying to process what I was seeing. Laura was sitting nearby, a smug smile on her face. It's so nice of you to let Emily dance with her first love, Laura said, her voice dripping with condescension. She even invited him to your wedding. You know, but he couldn't make it. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. What the hell is going on? I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. Laura's smile widened. Oh, Michael, don't make a scene. Emily is just catching up with an old friend. You should be happy for her. Happy? I was anything but happy. The rage bubbling inside me threatened to boil over. You told her to make arrangements for tonight. I snapped. You knew about this guy. You both knew what else has she planned. And Laura didn't answer. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. This was a spontaneous reunion. It was a carefully orchestrated humiliation. Emily must have heard the commotion because she appeared at my side, pulling me away from the others. Her expression was serious, and I could tell I was going to like what she had to say. We stepped into the hotel lobby, away from prying eyes. Michael, she began, her voice calm, but firm. The man I danced with is Samuel Harris. He is my first love, my only love. Her words knocked the wind out of me. I struggled to breathe. Emily pressed on her tone, unwavering. We were together before I met you. We couldn't be together at the time, but I never stopped loving him. When I met you, I thought I could move on. I tried to be a good wife, and I was happy, but I always loved Samuel. The floor seemed to shift beneath my feet. In leaving with him, Emily said, quietly, I've always loved him, and I can't pretend anymore. I stared at her, my mind reeling. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was standing before me, tearing my world apart. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even move. It was as if I'd been hit by a freight train, and the world around me had collapsed into a dull, roaring silence. Emily, my wife, my partner of 13 years, was leaving me for another man. Not just any man, but Samuel Harris, her first love. Someone I never knew existed yet. Apparently, he had been in the shadows of our marriage all along. She kept talking, her voice steady and calm, like she was explaining a necessary but unfortunate decision. Samuel is the reason I couldn't have children with you, she said. It would have been cruel to have children with you and then leave taking them away. I tried to be a good wife. I gave myself to you completely, Michael. I really did. But I've always loved Samuel. The air left my lungs, and my knees felt weak. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. You lied to me. I choked out, all these years you lied. Emily's expression softened as if she was trying to be kind. I never wanted to hurt you. If Samuel hadn't come back into my life, I would have stayed with you forever. I would have made you happy. I was happy with you. But now that HE's back, I can't pretend anymore. Pretend that we're decoded in my mind, like a curse. Our entire marriage had been a lie. A charade she had played out while waiting for her true love to return. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to break something. Anything to release the pain and rage boiling inside me. But instead, I stood there, frozen as the reality of her betrayal washed over me. She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. Don't, I said, sharply. Don't you dare touch me. Her hand hovered in the air for a moment before she let it drop. I'm sorry, Michael, she said, quietly. I never meant for it to end like this. I laughed. Barely. End like this. You planned this, didn't you? The hotel, the dinner, the dancing. It was all a setup. You wanted to humiliate me. Emily shook her head. No, it was like that. I wanted to say goodbye in a way that would give us both closure. Closure. My voice cracked with disbelief. You call this closure? You danced with him, right in front of me. You humiliated me in front of our friends. You planned this whole evening to tear my life apart. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. You're sorry. I stepped closer. my voice rising with anger. You're sorry for betraying me, for throwing away 13 years of marriage, for lying to me. Day after day. Year after year. Sorry. Doesn't even begin to cover it. Emily took a step back, her tears falling freely. Now, I didn't want to hurt you. But you did. I snapped. And you didn't care. You were happy to destroy me. To leave me with nothing. Her tears didn't move me. I had no sympathy left. The love it felt for her was twisted into something unrecognizable. A toxic mix of anger, pain and resentment. I want your rings. I said, coldly. The engagement ring. The wedding band. Give them to me. Now Emily blinked in shock. What? Michael? You're not asking. I said. My voice. I scolded. If you don't, take them off. I will. And if I have to, I'll rip them off your finger. Myself. Her face crumpled. And for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She quickly pulled the rings off and handed them to me with trembling hands. I'm so sorry, she whispered again. I took the rings and clenched them in my fist. Get out. Michael. Get out. She hesitated, as if she wanted to say more, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned and walked away, heading back to the hotel room we were supposed to share. I grabbed my suitcase, threw my clothes inside and left the room key at the front desk. As I walked out of the hotel, I didn't look back. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced with thoughts of Emily, Samuel, and the life, I thought, we'd built together. Every memory felt tainted. Now every smile, every laugh, every moment of intimacy. It was all a lie. When I pulled into the driveway, the house loomed dark and empty. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the front door, unable to move. Finally, I forced myself out of the car and into the house. I locked the door behind me, then went straight to the garage. I had to do something. Anything to keep from spiraling into despair. I grabbed a box of trash bags and headed to the bedroom. Methodically, I began packing Emily's belongings into the bags. Her clothes, her jewelry, her shoes. Everything went into the trash bags without a second thought. As I emptied one of the drawers, I found the keys taped to the bottom. One was for a safe deposit box, the other for a small personal safe. Curious, I pocketed the keys and continued my task. I took all the jewelry I had ever given Emily and threw it into a bag. I emptied the filing cabinet of all her personal documents and found her password book, which I copied for later use. By the time I was done, it was nearly 10. The house was eerily silent and my heart was still pounding with rage and hurt. I cowed in sleep. My mind wouldn't rest. Instead, I searched online for information about local storage units. Emily had mentioned one in passing, and I wanted to know what she was hiding. I found the storage facility and drove there, my hands shaking with a mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. The unit was locked, but I used my engineering skills to pick the lock inside. I found boxes of files into locked cabinets. What I discovered inside those cabinets shattered what little remained of my soul. The first cabinet contained detailed plans Emily and Samuel had made to circumvent our prenuptial agreement to take everything from me. The second cabinet contained files about Samuel, damning documents that confirmed everything it suspected about him. He was a narcissist, a manipulator, and a predator. I took out my camera and documented everything. Every file, every detail I needed. Evidence. By the time I left the storage unit, the sun was rising. I was emotionally wrecked, but determined to fight back. I wouldn't let Emily and Samuel destroy me. This was over, not by a long shot. I sat in a nearby cafe, sipping coffee and staring out the window at the rising sun. The pain was still fresh, but my mind was laser-focused on one thing: revenge. I had all the evidence I needed to prove Emily and Samuel's betrayal, but I wasn't ready to confront them. Just yet. I needed to be smart about this. If I took my hand too soon, they'd find a way to twist the narrative and make me the villain. No, I had to play this carefully. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Emily. She wanted to come by the house and pick up her car. I took a deep breath before responding, keeping my message short and cold. Your car. The lease is in my name. I've been paying for it since day one. You'll be using it for the next 8 weeks until the lease ends. Your belongings are in bags. If you don't pick them up by tomorrow, you'll burn them. The locks have been changed. Don't bring him with. You'll like the outcome. Moments later, my phone rang. It was her sister, Sophie. I let it go to voicemail, but the next message was an explosion of incoherent screaming. Michael, how dare you treat my sister like this? You're disgusting. I hung up before she could finish. I wasn't in the mood for their self-righteous nonsense. They knew what Emily had done and they'd covered for her. They weren't victims. They were accomplices. I grabbed Emily's wedding dress from the closet, walked out to the garden and set it on fire in the fire pit. The flames consumed the fabric quickly, and as the smoke rose into the sky, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. That dress had symbolized our marriage, a union that Emily had destroyed. Now it was ashes. An hour later, Emily arrived. She brought Laura and her husband, Brian, with her. Brian approached me, cautiously, his hands in his pockets. Michael, how are you? He asked, quietly. I let out a bitter laugh. How do you think I am? Brian, furious. He looked down at the ground, clearly uncomfortable. I didn't know. Didn't you? I snapped. You're married to one of Emily's best friends. Are you seriously going to tell me you had no idea what was going on? Brian didn't respond. Emily stepped forward, her expression a mix of regret and irritation. Michael, she began, her tone soft. I know you're angry, but we need to be civil. I barked. You humiliated me. You lied to me for 13 years, and now you want me to be civil. She flinched at my words, but kept her composure. I know I hurt you, she said. And sorry, but this isn't like you. Michael, burning my wedding dress, threatening to burn my things. That's not the man I married. I took a step closer, my voice low and dangerous. No, Emily, the man you married was a fool who believed you loved him. But that man is gone. You killed him the moment you ran into Samuel's arms. Emily looked away, blinking back. Tears. Let me get my things, she said, quietly, and then it'll be out of your life. I gestured toward the trash bags by the door. Take them and go. Laura and Bear helped load the bags into their car as they worked. Emily glanced at the fire pit, her eyes widening in horror when she saw the ashes. My dress, she whispered. Burned when I was in the first. Burned, I said, coldly. Just like our marriage. She stared at the ashes, her hands trembling. You didn't have to do that, she said, her voice breaking. No, I agreed, but it felt good. Laura glared at me, her eyes filled with anger. You're a monster, she hissed. I smirked. I learned from the best. Laura, you and Emily taught me everything I need to know about betrayal. Laura opened her mouth to retort, but Brian grabbed her arm and shook his head. Let's go, he said quietly. As they loaded the last of the bags into the car, Emily turned back to me. Michael, she began. I know you're hurting. But stop, I interrupted. Ed, I don't want to hear it. You've said enough. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Goodbye, Michael. Without another word, she climbed into the car and they drove away that night. I cowed in sleep. I kept replaying the day's events in my mind, wondering if it'd gone too far. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of the files it found in the storage unit. Emily hadn't just cheated on me. She had planned to ruin me. I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I went to the bank with the key I found in her drawer. The safe deposit box contained bonds worth a significant amount of money, all in Emily's name. I photographed everything later that day. I received another message from Emily. I need my car. Michael, be reasonable. I replied, coldly. Done. Being reasonable. You'll get the car when I'm ready to get it to you. Until then, stay out of my way over the next few days. I worked tirelessly to uncover every secret Emily had kept from me. I closed our joint account and changed all my passwords. I searched her emails and messages for more evidence of her betrayal. What I found made my blood boil. Emily and Samuel had been meeting regularly at hotels while she was supposedly visiting her sister. They'd been planning their future together for years. A future that involved DRA raining me of every penny I had. They weren't just cheaters. They were con artists. By the time Monday morning rolled around, I was ready to face the world again. I went into the office early to check my ace leaving vacation hours. Rachel, our HR manager, was always in early. Had she immediately noticed something was off? Michael, she said softly. What happened? I gave her a hollow smile. My world collapsed. I said, bluntly, Emily has been cheating on me for years. She's leaving me for another man. And now she's trying to destroy me. Rachel's eyes widened in shock. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I had no idea. Might have did, I said bitterly. But I'm not going to let them win. Rachel stepped closer, her expression full of concern. If you need anything at all, you can count on me, she said. You've always been kind to me. Michael, you deserve better than this. Her words gave me a small glimmer of hope, but it was fleeting moments later. My boss called me into his office. When I stepped inside, I could tell he wasn't happy. Michael, he began. Emily came to my house yesterday. She showed me photographs of her injuries. I clenched my fists. Mr. Daw, I said, through gritted teeth. You've known me for years. Do you really believe I would lay a hand on her? He hesitated. I don't know what to believe, he admitted. But this situation is bad for the company. We can't afford negative publicity. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. Fine, I said. They'll make it easy for you. I quit, Michael. No, I interrupted. I have 9 and 2 weeks of vacation time. That will more than cover my notice period. I'm done without waiting for a response. I walked out of his office. As I left the building, I felt a strange sense of freedom. I had lost my job, my marriage, and many of my so-called friends. But I was broken. I was just getting started after leaving the office for the last time. I sat in my car for a while, staring at the steering wheel. The anger had subsided, replaced by exhaustion. My life had been dismantled piece by piece. In just a matter of days, I had lost my wife, my job, and now, even my parents seemed to believe Emily's lies. I was ready to go home. The house felt empty and suffocating. Instead, I decided to take a drive to clear my head. I ended up in the next town over, pulling into a small diner I used to frequent during my college days. It was quiet inside, the kind of place where no one asked questions. And that was exactly what I needed. As I sipped my coffee, I went to the next steps in my head. Follow the money. That's what they always said in crime shows. Emily and Samuel had been playing a long game, and I was certain there were more secrets to uncover. The bonds in the safe deposit box were just the beginning. The next morning, I headed to the bank again. This time, I asked to speak to the manager privately. Good morning, Mr. Carter. The manager greeted me with a firm handshake. How can I help you today? I need to verify some information about a safe deposit box. I began handing over the key. Found in Emily's drawer. It's registered under my wife's name. But I have reason to believe there are funds in there that were intended to be shared marital assets. The manager's expression tightened, but he nodded. Let me check our records. While I was gone, I tapped my fingers nervously on the desk. The wait felt endless, but when he returned, his face was more serious. There are 2 safe deposit boxes registered under your wife's name. he said. One is the one you accessed earlier, but there's a second one at our main branch across town. My heart skipped a beat. You'll need access to that box. Unfortunately, you'll need a court order for that. He replied without your wife's permission. We can't grant access. I clenched my jaw. Frustrated. I was surprised, but it was another roadblock. You'd have to overcome as I left the bank. My phone buzzed with a message. It was Emily. Again. We need to talk. You'd like to come by and get the rest of my things. I ignored her message, and instead called Heather Morrison. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. It met through Samantha. Michael, she answered, cheerfully. What's the latest? I need your help. Getting a court order. I explained there's a second safe deposit box in Emily's name, and I have a strong feeling it's connected to her scheme with Samuel. Heather didn't miss. Beat. He'll get the paperwork started right away. He'll also arrange for a private investigator to look into Samuel's financials. Well, find out exactly what they've been hiding. I thanked her and hung up, feeling more confident than I had in days. Heather was efficient and ruthless. Exactly the kind of ally I needed. Back at home, I sat down with Emily's password book and started digging through her accounts again. I discovered that she had been making regular payments to a storage facility in town, one I hadn't seen before. I decided to pay it a visit. When I arrived at the storage facility, I showed the clerk a copy of the payment receipts. You'd found? Looks like these payments are under my wife's name, I said. But we're going through a divorce, and I'm trying to sort out our shared assets. The clerk frowned. I can't let you in without the account holder's permission. I sighed, reaching for my wallet. How about I make it worth your while? The clerk hesitated for a moment before nodding. Discreetly. Make it quick. I don't want any trouble. He led me to the unit and unlocked it inside. I found rows of neatly packed boxes, along with two locked filing cabinets. I grabbed my portable toolkit from the car and carefully picked the locks, my hands shaking with adrenaline. What I found inside made my stomach turn. The first cabinet contained detailed plans of Emily's scheme. She had kept meticulous records of her meetings with Samuel, financial documents, outlining their plan to siphon money from me, and even correspondence discussing how they would cover their tracks. The second cabinet was worse. It contained files on Samuel's other victims, photographs, emails, court documents, all detailing how he had manipulated, deceived multiple women over the years. It was clear that I wasn't the first man he tried to ruin, nor would I be the last. I took photos of everything, documenting every file, every letter, every damning piece of evidence. By the time I finished, it was nearly dawn. I returned the unit to its original state. I'm left without a trace. Back home, I spread out the photos on my kitchen table, organizing them by date and subject. Emily's betrayal ran deeper than I had ever imagined. She and Samuel hadn't just been planning to leave me. They'd been plotting to destroy me completely. Their ultimate goal was to strip me of everything I owned and leave me with nothing. The realization hit me like a freight train. This was just about revenge. This was about survival. I needed to destroy their plans before they destroyed me. The next morning, Emily showed up at the house, this time alone. I watched her from the window as she rang the doorbell, looking impatient and irritated. I took my time, opening the door. What do you want? I asked coldly. I'm here to get my things, she replied, crossing her arms defensively. I don't want any trouble. Michael. I let out a bitter laugh. Trouble, you think? I'm the one causing trouble. You've been scheming behind my back for years, and now you're trying to play the victim. Emily's expression hardened. I never meant to hurt you. Spare me. The lies. I snapped. I've seen the storage unit. Emily. I know everything. Her eyes widened in shock, and for the first time, I saw real fear on her face. What are you talking about? She stammered. I leaned in, closer, my voice low and menacing. I know about the plans, the files, the safe deposit boxes. I know what you and Samuel have been doing. Emily took a step back, her face pale. You don't understand. No, I interrupted. You don't understand. You thought you could destroy me. You thought you could take everything I work for and walk away unscathed. But you underestimated me. I took a step forward and Emily backed away. You're not going to win, Emily, I said. He'll make sure of that. With that, I slammed the door in her face. I immediately called Heather to update her on what it found. This changes everything, she said, sounding impressed with this evidence. We can go straight to the courts. Samuel won't know what hit him. Good, I said. I want them both to pay for what they've done. Heather's tone grew serious. Michael, this is going to get messy. Are you sure you're ready for this? I didn't hesitate. I've never been more ready. The day after I confronted at the door, I woke up feeling strangely calm. The rage that had consumed me since our anniversary night had dulled into something colder and more calculated. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was planning. I spent the morning organizing all the photos and files it collected from the storage unit. The more I sorted through the evidence, the clearer the picture became. Emily and Samuel had been plotting my downfall for years. The documents revealed that Emily had been funneling money into secret accounts, while Samuel guided her every step of the way. There were even drafts of divorce papers they'd prepared months earlier, long before Emily ever claimed it abused her. It wasn't a sudden affair. It was a long-term plan. I documented everything, making sure I had multiple backups on both physical drives and secure cloud storage. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance by mid-morning. I received a call from Heather. Michael, she said, her tone brisk. I've secured the court order for the second safe deposit box. Meet me at the bank at noon. On my way, I replied at the bank. Heather and I were escorted to the vault by the manager. He seemed uncomfortable, clearly aware of the sensitive nature of the situation. This box was opened 6 months ago. The manager explained. Mrs. Carter has been making regular visits ever since. Heather gave me a knowing look. Let's see what she's been hiding. The manager opened the box and stepped aside, allowing us to examine its contents. Inside we found more bonds, several bank statements and a sealed envelope marked for Samuel. Heather carefully opened the envelope. Inside were handwritten notes from Emily, detailing her plans to leave me and join Samuel. The notes were nauseating to read. She spoke of me as if I were a temporary inconvenience, a stepping stone on her way to a better life. There was also a list of assets she intended to take from me, including my house, my car, and even my family heirlooms. Heather shook her head in disbelief. She wasn't just planning to leave you. She was planning to gut you. I clenched my fists. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, I met with a private investigator. Heather had recommended his name was Ian, and he was a former detective with a no-nonsense demeanor. I've been looking into Samuel Harris, Ian said, as we sat down in his office. The guy's a textbook narcissist. He has been pulling this scam for years, targeting wealthy or stable women, convincing them to leave their partners and then draining their finances. Ian handed me a folder. Inside were reports from other cases where Samuel had been involved. The pattern was clear. Samuel would charm his way into a woman's life, use her to climb the social ladder, and then discard her once he'd gotten what he wanted. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? I asked. Ian shrugged. He is smart. He covers his tracks well, and most of his victims are too embarrassed to come forward. But he has gone sloppy lately. Your case could be the one that finally takes him down. That thought gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. Samuel was just some random lover Emily had reconnected with. He was a predator, and he'd chosen the wrong man to cross. A few days later, I received a call from Emily's sister, Sophie. Michael, she said, her voice hesitant. I don't know if I should be calling you. Why are you? I asked coldly. There was a pause on the other end of the line before she sighed. I didn't know everything, I asked, but I knew enough and I feel awful about it. You should. I snapped. You helped cover for her. I thought she was happy. Sophie said quietly. I thought you two had a good marriage. But then Samuel came back, and everything changed. Emily started talking about how she never loved you. How she was only with you because Samuel wasn't around. Her words cut deep, but I forced myself to stay composed. Why are you telling me this now? Because I want to make things right, she said. I have some of her things here. Letters, diaries. I thought, you might want to see them. I agreed to meet her the next day. Sophie met me at a cafe in town. Looking nervous and uncomfortable. She handed me a box filled with notebooks and letters. I didn't read everything, she said. But from what I saw, Emily was living a double life. I took the box and thanked her. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. My gratitude was tinged with bitterness. Sophie might have had good intentions now, but she had stayed silent for far too long. Back home, I went through the contents of the box. Most of the notebooks were journals Emily had kept over the years. As I read through them, I saw the gradual shift in her thoughts. In the early years of our marriage, she wrote about our life together with warmth and affection. But as time went on, her entries grew colder, more calculating. She started writing about Samuel, more frequently fantasizing about the life she wanted with him. One entry dated just a few months before our anniversary stood out. I've done everything, Samuel asked. The accounts are set up and the documents are in place. Once we're married, well, be unstoppable. Michael won't know what hit him. I slammed the notebook shut, feeling a fresh wave of rage. They'd been planning this for years, and they'd nearly succeeded. That evening, I met with Heather to discuss our next step. We had more than enough to expose them, Heather said. But I think we need to play this smart. Let them make the first move. What do you mean? I asked. Heather leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with determination. They're going to file for divorce soon. When they do, they'll try to paint you as the villain, an abusive husband. Well, let them make their case first. And then, well, destroy them with the evidence we've gathered. I nodded slowly. And what about Samuel? Heather's smile was cold. I'd been in touch with some of his previous victims. They're willing to testify by the time. What? Samuel will be facing charges in multiple jurisdictions. It was a good plan. A brutal plan. And it was exactly what I needed. 2 weeks later, I received the divorce papers. Emily was accusing me of emotional and physical abuse. She claimed it controlled her finances, isolated her from her family, and repeatedly harmed her during our marriage. It was all nice, but I was surprised. I handed the papers to Heather, who skimmed through them with a smirk. They're playing right into our hands, she said. She sent a formal response to Emily's lawyer, agreeing to the terms of the divorce, but rejecting the abuse allegations. The stage was set for a courtroom battle, one that Heather was fully prepared to win. Let's make them regret ever trying to ruin you, Heather said. As we left her office, I couldn't have agreed more. The courtroom was packed. When I arrived for the first hearing, it felt surreal walking into that space, knowing that my entire life would be dissected and judged. Heather walked beside me, calm and composed. As always, her presence was reassuring. She Sophie'd herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew they were going to win. As I took my seat, I scanned the room. Emily was already there, sitting next to her lawyer, Miss Johnston. She looked polished and composed, dressed in a conservative outfit that screamed victim. But I could see the cracks in her facade, the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the table a little too tightly. Then I saw him, Samuel Harris. He sat behind Emily, looking smug and self-assured. His suit was expensive, his posture confident. He caught my eye and smirked. It took every ounce of restraint I had not to march over and wipe the grin off his face. Heather leaned in and whispered, "Let them dig their own graves. We've got this." I nodded, forcing myself to focus on the task at hand. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Miss Johnston took the floor. launching into a dramatic monologue about how Emily had endured years of emotional torment and physical abuse at my hands. She painted me as a controlling, manipulating monster who had isolated Emily from her friends and family. I sat there, stone-faced, as she twisted the narrative. Emily took the stand. Next, she cried, as she recounted our marriage, describing me as a jealous, possessive husband who told and handled her working night shifts. She claimed I would lash out in fits of rage, leaving her bruised and terrified. As she spoke, she presented the court with photos of her supposed injury. Yes, bruises on her face and arms. The photos had been carefully staged, but I knew the truth. I recognized Samantha Weissman's handiwork. Heather sat beside me, her expression neutral, but I could see the fire in her eyes. Emily continued her performance, describing the night of our anniversary. That was the breaking point, she said, her voice trembling. I had planned a special night for us, but Michael's jealousy took over. He threatened me. He demanded my rings and he burned my wedding dress. Her sobs echoed through the courtroom. Miss Johnston turned to the judge. Your Honor, my client is seeking not only a divorce, but also protection from further harm. She requests full ownership of their shared assets, as well as compensation for the emotional and physical trauma she has endured. The judge nodded solemnly. Thank you, Miss Johnston. Miss Reese, you may step down. As Emily returned to her seat, she glanced at me briefly for a moment. I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not regret, but fear. She knew what was coming. Heather rose to her feet, her movements deliberate and measured. Your Honor, she began, her voice steady. I would like to cross-examine Miss Reese. The judge granted permission, and Emily reluctantly returned to the stand. Heather approached her, slowly, her tone gentle, but firm. Reese, you've just described a marriage filled with violence and fear. You've presented photos of your alleged injuries. But I'd like to ask, can you provide any medical records to support these claims? Emily hesitated. I didn't go to the hospital. Why not? I was scared. Emily replied. I didn't want anyone to know. Heather nodded as if considering her answer. So you endured years of physical abuse, but you never once sought medical attention or reported it to the police. Emily shifted uncomfortably. No. Heather's gaze sharpened. And yet you claim that your sister took photos of your injuries. Yes. Heather pressed a button on her laptop and the courtroom screens lit up with images of the same bruises Emily had presented. Only now they were accompanied by timestamps and metadata. These photos were taken by Samantha Weissman, Heather announced, a professional makeup artist. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Heather turned back to Emily. Can you explain why a makeup artist would be involved in documenting your so-called injuries? Emily's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Heather smiled coldly. We have sworn testimony from Miss Weissman, confirming that she applied the makeup for these photos at your request. Emily's lawyer shot to her feet. Objection overruled. The judge said. His tone clipped. Continue. Miss Turner. Heather continued, without missing a beat. Miss Ree, you've accused my client of burning your wedding dress. But isn't it true that you were planning to wear that dress to marry Mr. Harris? Emily's eyes widened. No, that's not true. Heather pressed a button, and a new image appeared on the screen. A photograph of Emily and Samuel at a hospital gala. Emily was wearing the same wedding ring I had given her. The caption read, Drive Harris some fiancé. Emily. We Heather. Let the silence stretch before speaking again. Miss Ree, you claimed that you loved my client and that you were faithful to him. But this photograph, along with countless hotel records and financial statements, tells a very different story. Emily looked like she was about to faint. Heather turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have evidence that in recent drive, Harris conspired to defraud Mr. Carter, both emotionally and financially. We also have proof that they fabricated abuse allegations to strengthen their case. The judge's expression darkened. I've seen enough for today. Court is adjourned until tomorrow. Outside the courthouse, I took a deep breath. The weight of the day's events settled heavily on my shoulders. Heather joined me, her expression triumphant. We've got them, Michael. Tomorrow. Well, finish this. I nodded. Thank you, Heather, for everything. She smiled. This isn't over yet, but we're on the right track. As I walked to my car, I saw Emily and Samuel standing by their vehicle. Samuel's smug demeanor had vanished. He looked shaken, glancing nervously around, as if expecting someone to confront him. Emily caught my eye, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I had once loved. But that woman was gone. All that remained was a liar and a fraud. I turned away without a word, determined to see this through to the bitter end. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse early. I barely slept the night before, but I was tired. I was fueled by a mix of adrenaline, anger, and determination. This wasn't just about to divorce anymore. This was about reclaiming my life and exposing the lies that had almost destroyed me. Heather met me at the entrance, looking as composed as ever. You ready for today? She asked. More than ready, I replied. Let on. Finish this. As we walked inside, I spotted Emily and Samuel near the front of the courtroom. Emily avoided my gaze, her posture tense. Samuel, on the other hand, tried to act confident, but I could see the cracks in his facade. His arrogance was slipping. Good. The hearing began promptly at 9 a.m. The judge looked serious, as if he already had an idea of how this would end. Turner, the judge addressed Heather. You may continue your cross-examination. Heather stood, her presence commanding the room. Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to call Mr. Samuel Harris to the stand. Samuel's name echoed through the courtroom, and he hesitated for a moment before standing as he made his way to the witness box. I noticed how uncomfortable he looked. Gone was the smug confidence from before he sat down, adjusted his tie, and tried to compose himself. Heather, wasted time. Mr. Harris, you've testified that your relationship with him only became romantic after her marriage began to deteriorate. Is that correct? Yes, Samuel replied, his voice steady, but lacking its usual arrogance. Heather walked closer, her heels clicking on the polished floor. And you maintain that you were merely a supportive friend until recently. That's right, he said. Heather nodded. Let us talk about your hotel stays. Then over the past 10 years, you've booked over 2 hotel rooms under various names. Isn't that correct? Samuel shifted in his seat. I travel a lot for work. Heather smiled. Of course. But isn't it true that many of these bookings coincided with Miss Reese's supposed visits to her sister? Samuel hesitated. I don't recall. Heather pressed a button on her laptop, and the courtroom monitors lit up with hotel receipts and photos of Samuel and Emily together. Do these refresh your memory, Mr. Harris? Samuel's face rained. Those were business trips. Heather raised an eyebrow. Business trips with a married woman. Samuel fumbled for words. She needed someone to talk to. Heather's tone grew sharper. And did she also need someone to share a bed with? There were murmurs in the courtroom, and the judge banged his GVL order. Heather didn't relent. Mr. Harris, do you deny having an ongoing affair with him throughout her entire marriage to Mr. Carter? Samuel clenched his jaw. No, I don't. I don't deny it. Heather's expression didn't change. Thank you for your honesty. Now let's talk about the fabricated abuse allegations. Were you aware that Reese planned to accuse Mr. Carter of domestic violence? Samuel shook his head. No. Heather clicked her laptop again, and a series of text messages appeared on the screen. The messages were between Samuel and Emily. In them, they discussed how to make the abuse claims believable. They even referenced Samantha Weissman and makeup skills. Samuel's face turned pale. Would you like to change your answer, Mr. Harris? Heather asked, her voice icy. Samuel didn't respond. Heather continued. Mr. Harris, you're a respected surgeon. You're supposed to save lives, not ruin them yet. Here you are conspiring with a married woman to destroy an innocent man's life. Why? Samuel finally spoke, his voice shaken. I love her. Heather's eyes narrowed. Love, is that what you call it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like manipulation. Samuel glared at her. You don't understand. Heather leaned in. Oh, I understand perfectly. You saw a vulnerable woman and exploited her. You used her to bolster your own image to climb the social ladder. And when she was no longer useful, you planned to discard her. Samuel remained silent. His hands clenched into fists. Heather turned to the judge. Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness. As Samuel stepped down, I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. He looked defeated. His arrogance completely stripped away. Next, Heather called Samantha Weissman to the stand. Samantha was calm and composed. She explained how she had been hired to create the fake bruises for Emily's photos. Her testimony was clear and damning. By the time she finished, it was obvious to everyone in the room that the abuse allegations were fabricated. The judge leaned forward, his expression stern. Miss Johnston, do you have any further evidence to present? Miss Johnston stood looking visibly shaken. No, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Very well. I will now render my decision. The courtroom fell silent. The judge began. This case has revealed a disturbing pattern of lies and manipulation, Mr. Carter has been the victim of a calculated conspiracy to destroy his reputation and livelihood. The evidence presented leaves no doubt that the abuse allegations were false and malicious. He turned to Emily. Misery, your actions were reprehensible. You betrayed the trust of your husband, your friends, and your community. You sought to ruin a man who loved you all, for the sake of another man who clearly had no genuine love for you. Emily looked down, tears streaming down her face. The judge continued. I hereby dissolve the marriage between Michael Carter and Emily Ree. The prenuptial agreement will be enforced in full. Additionally, Emery is ordered to pay Mr. Carter's legal fees. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Furthermore, I am imposing a fine of $50 on him. For her perjury and false allegations, failure to pay will result in a 3-month prison sentence. The judge's gaze shifted to Samuel Drive. Harris, your actions are disgraceful as a member of the medical community. You are held to a higher standard. Your conduct in this case has been nothing short of appalling. Two officers entered the courtroom, and the judge nodded to the MDR. Harris, you are hereby placed under arrest on charges of fraud and perjury. The officers approached Samuel and cuffed him. He didn't resist. He simply hung his head, defeated. The judge banged his gavel. Court is adjourned. I left the courtroom. I was surrounded by friends and supporters. Rachel hugged me tightly, her eyes filled with pride. You did it, she whispered. It's over. I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It was just over. I was free. As I stepped outside, the sun hit my face warm and bright. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. As I stepped outside the courthouse, a wave of emotions hit me all at once. Relief, exhaustion, anger, and something else I hadn't felt in months. Hope. I stood there for a moment, letting the sun warm my face, reminding myself that this nightmare was finally over. Rachel was right behind me. She touched my arm gently. Michael, you're free. Now you've got your life back, she said, softly. I nodded, though it still hadn't fully sunk in. I'm free, but I lost a lot along the way. Her expression was full of empathy. Maybe, but you gained something too. You found out who really cares about you. I glanced around at the people gathered outside the courthouse. There were familiar faces. James, Tom, Josie, Michaela, and even a few co-workers from my old job. They had all come to show their support. It was humbling, knowing I wasn't as alone as I had felt during those dark months. James approached me first, grinning in his usual cheeky way. Mate, you absolutely destroyed them in there, he said, clapping me on the back. I don't think I've ever seen a courtroom so quiet. That lawyer of yours, bloody, brilliant. I chuckled. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. It felt strange to laugh. After everything he'd been through. Heather, mother, did all the hard work. I just sat there, trying not to lose my temper. You did well. Tom added, his voice steady and reassuring. You kept your dignity, even when they tried to tear you down. Thanks, Tom, I said. I appreciate it. Rachel lingered near the edge of the group, giving me space to talk to everyone. But I could feel her presence. Solid, steady and comforting. My parents were there too. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. They stood apart from the others. I hadn't spoken to them since they had sided with Emily. Seeing that, now I felt a mix of anger and sadness. My mother approached me hesitantly, her eyes filled with regret. Michael, I'm so sorry, she began, her voice trembling. We were wrong. We should have believed you. I crossed my arms, unsure of how to respond. The pain of their betrayal still stung deeply. My father cleared his throat. We let you down. Son, we were deceived by Emily. But that's no excuse, it's not, I said firmly. You chose to believe her lies over me. Your own son. My mother wiped her eyes. We were fooled by the photos and the stories. But after hearing everything in court, we see, now that we made a terrible mistake. I stared at them for a long moment, weighing my words carefully. It's going to take time to rebuild trust. I can't just forgive and forget overnight. We understand, my father said quietly. But we want to try. I nodded. Slowly. All right. Well, see, they looked relieved. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. The tension between us remained. It would take more than a simple apology to mend our relationship. As they walked away, Rachel stepped closer. You handled that well, she said. I sighed. I don't know if I did. It's hard to forgive people who abandoned me when I needed them most. It is, she agreed. But you're stronger now, and you don't have to face anything alone. Her words struck a chord in me. Rachel had been there through it all, quietly supporting me, never demanding anything in return. I realized then how much she meant to me. Thank you, I said, my voice soft for everything. She smiled. You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad you're okay. We stood there in comfortable silence for a moment before James broke it with a loud cheer. All right. Who's ready for a drink? We've got a lot to celebrate. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Laughed and we all headed to the local pub. It felt good to be surrounded by friends. Again, to feel like I belonged at the pub. The mood was jubilant. People raised their glasses, toasting to my freedom and the downfall of Samuel and Emily. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Josie sat next to me, a mischievous glint in her eye. So Michael, what's next for you? A fresh start? Maybe. I shrugged. I guess I'll start looking for a new job and figure out what I want from life. She grinned. Well, listen, if you ever need help with that, you know where to find us. Michaela chimed in, and don't forget, you've got options now. No more settling. You deserve someone who truly loves you. Her words hung in the air and I cowed in help, but glanced at Rachel. She caught my eye and smiled shyly later that evening as the celebration wound down. Rachel and I walked back to my house together. The streets were quiet. The night air cool and refreshing. I had fun tonight. Rachel said, me too. I replied. It's been a long time since I felt normal. You're normal, Michael. You just went through something terrible, but you're still the same kind, decent man you've always been. I stopped walking and turned to her. Rachel, you've been there for me, through everything. I don't know how I would have made it without you. She blushed, looking down at her hands. I just wanted to help. You did more than that, I said, stepping closer. You reminded me that there's still good in the world, that I'm not alone. She looked up, her eyes shining. Yuri, not alone. Michael, you never will be in that moment. I realized I was ready to let go of the past and embrace whatever the future held. I reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. Let's take it one step at a time, I said together. She agreed, her smile lighting up the night. The days after the trial passed in a blur. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace, but there was also a lingering emptiness. The kind of void that comes after losing something you thought would last forever. Emily was gone. My job was gone. Even my parents' unwavering support had been fractured. It felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump or retreat. Rachel. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Remained my constant. Every evening, we spent time together, talking, watching movies or simply sitting in silence. She didn't push, didn't mean anything from me. Her presence alone was enough to anchor me. One evening about a week after the trial, she surprised me by showing up at my house with a picnic basket. "What's this?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She smiled. "Cool, why? I figured you could use some fresh air. Let's take a drive." We ended up at a quiet park on the outskirts of town. The sun was setting, casting golden hues across the sky. Rachel spread out a blanket, and we sat down, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. "This is nice," I said, taking a deep breath. "I haven't done something like this I don't even remember." "Sometimes you just need to pause," she said, softly. "Life's been throwing punches at you. It's okay to stop and catch your breath." I looked at her, appreciating her insight. "You always seem to know what I need." She blushed, looking away. I care about you, Michael, more than I probably should." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I was at a loss for how to respond. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "I care about you too," I said, quietly. "You've been my rock through all of this. I don't think I've thanked you enough." "You don't have to thank me," she whispered. "Just be here. That's all I want." We sat in silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon for the first time in a long while. I felt something stir inside me, a spark of hope of possibility as the evening grew colder. We packed up the picnic and headed back to the car on the drive home. Rachel leaned her head against my shoulder. It felt natural, comforting. "I miss this," she murmured, feeling close to someone. I glanced at her. "Me too." When we reached my house, she hesitated at the door. "Do you want to come in?" I asked, my heart pounding. She smiled softly. "Not tonight, but soon." I nodded, understanding soon. Over the next few weeks, I focused on rebuilding my life. I updated my resume and started applying for jobs. It wasn't easy. My name had been dragged through the mud during the divorce proceedings, but I refused to let that stop me. One morning, I got a call from a competitor of my old firm, a company called J Enterprises. They were interested in interviewing me for a project management role. The interview was set for the following week, and I spent the days leading up to it, preparing. Rachel helped me practice conducting practice interviews and providing me with feedback. "You've got this," she said the night before. "You're talented, hardworking, and you've got integrity. They'd be lucky to have you." Her words bolstered my confidence. And the next day, I walked into the interview, feeling prepared. The manager, a man named Neil Davidson, was direct and professional. He didn't sugarcoat anything. "We've heard about what happened at your last company," he said, leaning back in his chair cart to explain. I met his gaze steadily. "I was falsely accused of things I didn't do. My ex-wife and her lover concocted a scheme to ruin me. It worked for a while, but I fought back, and the truth came out. I lost a lot in the process, but I never compromised my integrity." Davidson nodded slowly. "And now I'm ready to move forward," I said. "I want to work for a company that values honesty and hard work. I have the skills, the experience, and the determination to make a positive impact. There was a long pause before Davidson spoke again. I like your attitude, Carter. We've all had setbacks. It's how you recover that matters. Welcome to J Enterprises. Relief washed over me. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. As I left the office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had a job again. A fresh start. It wasn't just about the paycheck. It was about reclaiming my sense of purpose. That evening, I shared the good news with Rachel. I knew you'd get it, she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. Couldn't have done it without you, I said, hugging her tightly. You would have found your way, she whispered. You're stronger than you realize. Life began to fall into a comfortable rhythm. Work was fulfilling, and my relationship with Rachel continued to grow. We weren't rushing anything. Both of us were cautious, given our pasts, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. One evening, as we sat on the couch, watching a movie, Rachel turned to me. Michael, can I ask you something? Of course. She hesitated, biting her lip. Do you ever think about having a family, kids? I mean, I nodded. I've always wanted kids, even when Emily said she didn't. I held on to the hope that she'd change her mind. Rachel smiled softly. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I never thought it. Want kids. But with you, it feels different. My heart swelled at her words. Rachel, I'd love nothing more than to build a life with you. But we don't have to rush anything. Well, take it one step at a time. She leaned in, resting her head on my shoulder one step at a time. The following month flew by. My job at J Enterprises was going well, and Rachel and I continued to grow closer. We started talking about the future, buying a house, starting a family, and building a life together. One day, as we were walking through the park, Rachel stopped suddenly. Michael, there's something I need to tell you. I turned to her, concern flickering in my chest. What is it? She took a deep breath. I love you. I've loved you for a long time. Even before all of this happened. I was scared to say it before, but I don't want to be afraid anymore. I was speechless for a moment, overwhelmed by emotion. I love you too, Rachel, I said, pulling her into my arms. I've loved you since the day we met. She smiled through her tears. Then let's not waste any more time. We kissed, sealing the promise of a future together. That night, as we lay in bed, Rachel traced her fingers along my arm. Do you think we can be happy? She asked softly. I know we will, I said, with certainty. We've been through hell and back. We deserve this. She nodded, her eyes shining with hope together. I agreed. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. The past no longer haunted me. The future stretched out before me, filled with endless possibilities. And for the first time, I felt ready to embrace it. The months following the court case were transformative. My life had taken a sharp turn from devastation to recovery. The scars were still there, memories of betrayal and humiliation, but they didn't sting as much anymore. Rachel had become my guiding light, someone who stood by me without judgment with her support. And my new job at J Enterprises, things were finally looking up. I couldn't deny that what had gone through had changed me. I wasn't the same man I had been before. Emily's betrayal. Though perhaps that wasn't a bad thing. Pain has a way of reshaping a person, making them stronger, more resilient. It forces you to reevaluate what matters most in life. For me, it was trust, love and family, the real kind. One weekend, Rachel and I drove out to the countryside for a short getaway. We stayed at a charming bed and breakfast, surrounded by rolling hills and quiet scenic views. It was the perfect escape from everything as we sat on the porch, sipping wine and watching the sunset. Rachel broke the comfortable silence. Michael, she began, there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about. I turned to her, curious. What is it? She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. I've been thinking a lot about us, about what we've been through. what we want from life. And I realized that I want to be with you fully. No more holding back. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. I feel the same way. She smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. I've been afraid for so long. Afraid of intimacy. Afraid of being hurt. But you've shown me that it's okay to trust again. I want to build a life with you, Michael. A real life. Hearing those words from her felt like a bow from my wounded soul. I want that too. I've always wanted that with you. Rachel leaned in, resting her head on my shoulder. Then let's do it. Let's build something beautiful together. As the weeks passed, our relationship deepened. We started making plans for the future, talking about buying a house, starting a family, and even taking a long overdue vacation together. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine sense of happiness and contentment. One evening, while sorting through old boxes in my attic, I stumbled upon a photo album from my wedding with Emily. Seeing those pictures stirred conflicting emotions in me. I wasn't angry anymore, but there was still a lingering sadness. I had truly loved her once, and I believed she loved me too. I sat there for a while, flipping through the pages, remembering the man had been back then. Naive, hopeful, and utterly devoted to someone who didn't deserve it. Rachel found me sitting on the floor, lost in thought. "Hey," she said, softly, sitting beside me. "What's that?" I held up the album. Memories of a life that doesn't feel like mine anymore. She placed a hand on my arm. "It's okay to feel that way, you've been through a lot." I nodded, closing the album. It's strange. I don't feel angry at her anymore. Just sad for the time I wasted the love I gave to someone who couldn't appreciate it. Rachel leaned her head against my shoulder. "It wasn't wasted, Michael. It made you who you are today, and it led you to me." Her words brought a smile to my face. "You're right. It did." I set the album aside, feeling lighter. The past was the past, and it no longer had power over me. About a month later, I received a letter from my parents. It was the first time they'd reached out since the trial. "Dear Michael, we've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. We realize now that we made a terrible mistake in believing Emily's lies. We let you down when you needed us most. And for that, we are deeply sorry. We hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us. We miss you, and we'd love to see you again. When you're ready, with love, Mom and Dad." I read the letter several times, my emotions swirling. Forgiveness wasn't easy, especially when the betrayal came from those closest to you. But I also knew that holding on to resentment would only hurt me in the long run. Rachel found me staring at the letter, lost in thought. "Everything okay?" she asked. I handed her the letter as she read it quietly. "They're trying, Michael," she said, gently. "Maybe it's a start." I nodded, slowly. Maybe I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive them yet, but I knew I would eventually. Healing takes time, and I was learning to be patient with myself. One evening, as Rachel and I were preparing dinner, she turned to me with a mischievous smile. "I've been thinking," she said. "Oh, that sounds dangerous." She laughed. "No, seriously. I've been thinking about us, about the future." I set down the knife I was holding and gave her my full attention. "Go on." Rachel took a deep breath. "What if we start looking for a house? Something that's ours. A fresh start." My heart swelled at the thought. "I'd love that, really," I said, pulling her into a hug. "Let's do it." The next few weeks were filled with house hunting. We toured several properties, each one with its own charm. Eventually, we found the perfect place. A cozy cottage on the outskirts of town with a beautiful garden and plenty of room to grow. Standing in front of the house, Rachel squeezed my hand. "This feels right." "Doesn't it?" "Does," I agreed. "It feels like home." We made an offer that same day, and within weeks, the cottage was ours. Moving in was a chaotic, exhausting process, but it was also exciting. Rachel and I spent our days unpacking, decorating, and making the house our own. It was just a house. It was a symbol of our new beginning. One evening after we'd finished setting up the living room, Rachel curled up beside me on the couch. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" she asked softly. "Sometimes," I admitted, but not in a regretful way. "I think about how far I'd come, how much I've grown, and I wouldn't change a thing." She smiled, resting her head on my chest. I feel the same way as we sat there, wrapped in each other's arms. I realized that I had finally found what I'd been searching for. All alone. A true partner. Someone who loved me for who I was, without pretense or deception. Rachel was my future, and I couldn't wait to see what life had in store for us. In the months that followed, life began to settle into a peaceful rhythm. Rachel and I were thriving in our new home, building the life we'd always talked about. Our counseling sessions continued, and they brought us even closer together. Rachel's progress was remarkable. She no longer suffered the weight of her fears as heavily as she once did, and she seemed more confident in herself and in our relationship. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, with a glass of wine, Rachel leaned over and kissed me softly. "I never thought it'd be this happy," she whispered. I smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Neither did I." She gazed at me for a moment before speaking again. "I've been thinking about the future." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "What about?" Rachel took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine. "I want to have children with you." Her words took me by surprise. It was something we'd discussed in depth yet, given everything we'd both been through. But hearing her say it filled me with a joy I hadn't expected. "Are you sure?" I asked gently. "I know that's something you've struggled with." She nodded, her expression resolute. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I realized that my fears don't outweigh my desire to build a family with you. I want to give you the life you've always dreamed of, a home filled with love and laughter." I pulled her into a tight embrace, overcome with emotion. "Rachel, you've just made me the happiest man in the world." We sat there for a long time, holding each other and dreaming about the future. The next few weeks were filled with excitement and anticipation. We began making plans, discussing baby names, decorating a nursery, and talking about what kind of parents we wanted to be. It was a new chapter in our lives, and we were both eager to start it together. One afternoon, while I was at work, I received a text from Rachel. "Rachel, I have some news. Call me when you can." I stepped away from my desk and dialed her number immediately. "Hey, what's up?" I asked, curious about her message. Rachel's voice was filled with excitement. "I took a test this morning. We're going to have a baby." "Michael." I was stunned into silence, a rush of emotions washing over me. Joy, disbelief, and overwhelming love for the woman on the other end of the line. "Are you serious?" I finally managed to say yes. I wanted to wait until I saw the doctor to confirm it, but I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. I laughed, tears welling up in my eyes. "Rachel, that's incredible. I can't believe it." We spent the rest of the call talking about how we would share the news with our friends and family. It felt surreal, but in the best way possible. A few weeks later, Rachel and I stood in our kitchen, preparing in dinner, when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find my brother, Dan, standing there with a bottle of champagne in hand. "I heard the news," he exclaimed, pulling me into a bear hug. "Congratulations, big brother. You're going to be an amazing dad." "Thanks, Dan," I said, grinning from ear to ear. "Come in and Jose. Let's celebrate." Rachel joined us in the living room and Dan popped the champagne, pouring glasses for the three of us to new beginning things. He toasted, raising his glass to family. I added, clinking my glass against theirs as we sat together, reminiscing about our childhood and talking about the future. I couldn't help but feel grateful for everything I had. Life hadn't been easy, but it had led me to this moment. A moment filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. Not long after, I received another letter from my parents. This time, it was accompanied by a handwritten note from my father. "Michael, I know I've made mistakes and I've failed you in ways I never thought I would. I believed the lies and I turned my back on you when you needed me most for that. I am deeply sorry. I feel a lot about how to make things right, and I know that words aren't enough. I want to be there for you, for Rachel, and for your growing family. Please let us be part of your life. Again, with love, Dad. I sat with the letter in my hands, torn between anger and forgiveness. My parents had hurt me deeply, but they were still my family. And now that Rachel and I were starting our own family, I couldn't help but think about the importance of connection and reconciliation. When Rachel found me reading the letter, she placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Soft. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want to forgive him, but it's not easy." She nodded in understanding. "Take your time. There's no rush. But maybe it's worth giving them a chance to make things right." I sighed, knowing she was right. Yeah. Maybe a few days later, I decided to invite my parents over for dinner. Rachel helped me prepare the meal, and when they arrived, I greeted them with a mixture of apprehension and hope. My mother hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. "Michael, I'm so sorry." "I know," I said, quietly. "Let's sit down." We spent the evening talking about the past, the mistakes that had been made in the future. We all hoped to build together. It wasn't easy, but it was a step in the right direction. By the end of the night, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The wounds were still there, but they were beginning to heal as Rachel's pregnancy progressed. Our excitement grew. We attended doctor's appointments together, decorated the nursery, and shared our hopes and dreams for our child. It was a time of joy and anticipation, a time of healing and growth. One evening as we sat in the nursery, Rachel turned to me with a smile. "You know," she said, "after everything we've been through, I think we finally found our happy ending." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "It's not the ending, Rachel. It's just the beginning." She laughed, leaning in to kiss me. "You're right. The best is yet to come." The day finally arrived, when Rachel and I welcomed our baby into the world. A healthy, beautiful little girl named Emma Grace Carter. The moment I held her in my arms, I felt an overwhelming wave of love, unlike anything I had ever experienced. She was perfect, with tiny fingers that curled around mine and a sweet little smile that melted my heart. Rachel, exhausted but radiant, watched me with tears in her eyes. "She's everything we dreamed of," she whispered. "She is," I agreed, my voice thick with emotion. "And so are you." Our lives changed in the best possible way. The sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and occasional cries didn't faze us. We faced every challenge together as a team, watching Rachel embrace motherhood with such grace and joy. Only deepened my love for her. She was a natural, and Emma adored her. One evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, Rachel and I sat on the couch, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. "I've been thinking." I began glancing at her. "We've been through so much. Maybe it's time we make things official." Rachel's eyes widened. "Are you saying what?" "I think you're saying." I pulled a small box from my pocket, my heart pounding as I opened it to reveal a delicate diamond ring. "Rachel, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, laughing through her emotions. "Yes, of course, yes." I slipped the ring onto her finger, and we kissed, sealing our promise to build a life together. A life filled with love, trust, and honesty. Our wedding was a simple, intimate affair. We invited only our closest friends and family. Dan stood by my side as my best man and Rachel's sister. Josie served as a maid of honor. Emma, dressed in a tiny white dress, stole the show as she toddled down the aisle, holding a basket of flower petals. During the ceremony, I couldn't take my eyes off Rachel. She looked stunning, her smile brighter than the sun, and I felt like the luckiest man in the world. "I vow to love you, support you, and stand by you through whatever life throws our way," I promised her. "You've shown me what it means to truly live and deal spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt my love. Rachel's vows were equally heartfelt. You've shown me patience, kindness, and forgiveness. You've helped me become the woman I always wanted to be. I vow to be your partner, your best friend, and the mother our children deserve. I love you more than words can say. When we kissed, the applause from our guests echoed through the small chapel. It was a moment I would never forget. A few weeks after our wedding, I received a letter from Heather Morrison, my lawyer, and now a trusted friend. Her updates about Samuel Harris and Emily were enlightening. Harris had been stripped of his medical license and sentenced to 5 years in prison. His reputation was in ruins, and his former colleagues wanted nothing to do with him. Heather also informed me that he had filed for bankruptcy after being ordered to repay the women he had defrauded. As for Emily, she had lost her position at the hospital. After the details of the trial were made public, the General Nursing Council had issued a formal warning, and although she hadn't been banned from practicing, her career was effectively over. No hospital would hire someone with her tarnished record. I felt no joy in their downfall, only a sense of closure. They had tried to destroy me, but in the end, they had only destroyed themselves. Life continued to move forward. Rachel and I bought a new home with a large garden where Emma could play, and we made plans to expand our family. I had found a fulfilling job at J Enterprises, and my boss, Mr. Davidson, continued to be a great mentor and friend. One day, as I was working in the garden, Tom, my neighbor, came over with a grin on his face. "Looks like things have finally turned around for you, Michael," he said. "They have," I agreed. "I've got everything I could ever want." Tom nodded toward the house, where Rachel stood at the window, holding Emma in her arms. "She's a good woman," he said. "You're a lucky man." "I know," I said, smiling. "I won't take any of it for granted." One afternoon, while Rachel and I were out for a walk with Emma, we ran into my parents. It was an awkward moment at first, but my mother broke the silence. "Michael," she said softly, "we'd like to be part of Emma's life. If you'll let us." Rachel squeezed my hand, giving me the strength I needed to respond. "Well, see," I said. "It's going to take time." They nodded, understanding that trust had to be rebuilt. It wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to try for Emma's sake. As the years went by, our family grew. Rachel gave birth to a second child, a boy we named Benjamin. Watching Emma and Benjamin play together filled me with a joy I couldn't put into words. I had the family I'd always dreamed of, and I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. One evening, as Rachel and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset, she turned to me with a smile. "Do you ever think about the past?" she asked. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but mostly, I think about the future." She rested her head on my shoulder. "Me too." We sat in comfortable silence, the sound of our children's laughter echoing in the distance. The pain of the past had faded, replaced by hope and happiness. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was more than enough. Epilogue: years later, Emma and Benjamin would grow up, hearing stories about their parents' journey, the challenges we faced, the love we found, and the lessons we learned along the way. They knew the value of honesty, kindness, and resilience. And as I watched them grow into kind, compassionate individuals, I knew that everything we had been through had led us to this moment. Life has a way of surprising you, of throwing unexpected twists and turns your way. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that, even in the darkest times, this happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Hope for me. Hope came in the form of Rachel, a woman who helped me heal, who stood by me through thick and thin, and who gave me the family I always longed for. In not the man I was before, in stronger, wiser, and more grateful than ever. And as I look toward the future, I know one thing for certain: the best is yet to come. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.